I'm going to make a brief presentation on this topic of analogy, metaphor, and symbol. As we record and classify history into different periods, we see that each period stands out for a particular theme, or we can say each period is a manifestation of one aspect or power of the human mind. Humans first learn to communicate, then imitate nature, and then gradually gain mastery over it. But the broad focus of each period is limited to one general idea, which was considered the ultimate answer to all our questions, at least at that time. All the ages, from the Iron Age through the Reformation, Renaissance, Industrial Revolution, globalization, all of these have in turn largely focused on one theme. It may have been ethics, it may have been religion, or law, or trade, or science. And what we as individuals do in our daily activities is to simulate at a micro level the same way of functioning. We tend to think in a linear way, within a paradigm, narrowly focusing on one theme, mostly to the exclusion of all else. Our academic institutions today have divided and subdivided disciplines, and our research labs have delved deep into each compartment. But given the complexity of the issues that we handle today and the challenges that we face, we clearly need something more and different. Not our earlier methods of thinking and functioning, they definitely don't work. We need something that transcends the compartments. I believe this is where symbol, metaphor, and analogy come. They are devices that help one transcend the limits of a narrow approach. If we take poetry, for example, the symbolism of a poem can paint in a few lines a picture so beautiful that pages of prose cannot imitate. The following are lines from an Indian poem, Savitri, by the sage Sri Aurobindo. Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred, a nameless movement, an unthought idea, insistent, dissatisfied, without an aim, something that wished but knew not how to be, teased the inconscient to wake ignorance. The dawn that is described here is a symbol. It actually refers to the awakening of consciousness on earth. The symbol dawn, it describes a movement that begins with an idea, a dissatisfaction, an insistent and apparently aimless stirring that teases the inconscient to wake ignorance. We see that these lines also describe the umpteen movements and revolutions that we have seen in history. The Boston Tea Party, for example, it was the outcome of such a dissatisfaction. There was no intention of starting the American Revolution. Freedom was not on the mind. The English king had levied tax on tea, and the Americans wished for something, but knew not what or how, as the poem says. This stirring of an insistent, dissatisfied, nameless idea resulted in the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution. Similarly, the lady who began the civil rights movement that ended racial discrimination in the US, Rosa Parks, did not set out from home one day with the intention of ending segregation. She was traveling by bus and was asked to give up her seat and move to the back of the bus to make room for white passengers. She refused to comply. She had obtained a seat in the area reserved for colored people and was not inclined to bow to this demand. The simmering discontent among all colored people and the aspiration for equality, this teased the inconscient to wake the ignorance, as the poem says. And one fine day, one lady refused to give up her seat, and the civil rights movement was born, eventually making all people equal. Till today, the US has an African American president. The story of Mahatma Gandhi similarly begins with his being forced off a train because of his color while in South Africa. Any major movement, the abolition of slavery, women's liberation, the end of colonialism, or the Cold War, all of these began with a symbol dawn. Poetry is a symbolism that explains in a few words sublime ideas. There are many ways of knowing that transcend the limits of mathematical or philosophical statements or verified facts. Symbolism is one of the higher ways of knowing. It is not often that poetry is associated with knowledge or information, science or data, but the symbolism of poetry is a powerful way to communicate. In our education and training today, we are so focused on facts, statistics, logic. These undoubtedly have their place, but symbolism enables us to think holistically and keep in mind the integrality of life. The idea that we mistake the form for reality came up in discussion during the course earlier about how the study of forms becomes important and reality gets left behind. Forms are but shadows of reality. They do have a value, but they cannot provide us with all the answers. Plato talks about this in his analogy of the cave. He describes men who are chained in a cave facing the wall. All that these men get to see are the shadows of objects that are behind them on the wall that they face. Not having ever seen the real objects, these men, they live believing that the shadows are reality. Plato used this analogy to show the importance of the subjective experience over empirical evidence. Apart from describing our tendency to mistake the shadow on the wall for reality, Plato's story also shows how an analogy can be used to describe a situation or a phenomenon or a complex idea succinctly. Similarly, the three words that we're all very familiar with, emperor's new clothes, they describe a variety of people and situations in a way that explains very clearly, while also they entertain and make a deep impression. The analogy, metaphor and symbol, they are not quantitative or linear or logical. Yes, they are ambiguous. We try to cut out from our education and statistics all ambiguity. William Byers, the mathematician, says that even mathematics is ambiguous and that all creativity comes from ambiguity. The knowledge is there in the ambiguity. The change from the geocentric theory of the universe to the heliocentric one was a result of a minor anomaly. Copernicus did not set out in search of a new theory of astronomy. It was the ambiguity in the Julian calendar that set Copernicus working on it, and this resulted in revolutionizing astronomy. We need to enhance the capacity of the mind to understand not only certainty but also ambiguity. Tradition tells us that there is a higher knowledge which we call wisdom. I believe that symbols, analogies and metaphors can assist us in gaining this wisdom. Thank you.